Some stories are not just about love. They're about the choices we make, the pain we hide, and the sacrifices we never speak about. Today, we begin the journey of a couple whose love was strong, maybe too strong to break, but life had other plans. This is the story of Jane and Matthew, a story that will make you think deeply. The title is, Do You Call It Cheating? Jane and Matthew are husband and wife. They love each other very much. Their bond is strong, unbreakable. They have been married for 3 years. Both are working professionals. Their offices are close to each other. Matthew always picks Jane up after work. They try to spend as much time together as possible. They are not just a couple. They are best friends. They understand each other well. They support each other in everything. When they got married, they both decided not to have a baby too soon. They wanted to grow in their careers first. Life was going smooth. They were happy. Jane was about to get a promotion. Matthew was healthy and fit. He exercised regularly and hardly ever got sick. But then, something happened. Matthew's new office arranged a full medical checkup for all employees. It was a normal routine. Matthew joined this company just a few months ago, so he didn't know it was a regular thing. He got tested, just like everyone else. When the report came, it changed everything. Matthew was shocked when he saw the medical report. Everything looked normal at first. His blood pressure was fine. His heart rate was normal. Sugar and cholesterol levels were good. But then, he saw something that made his hands shake. The report said that Matthew could not become a father. It said he had a condition called male infertility. He read the line again and again. He could not believe it. How could it be possible? He was so healthy. He went to the gym every day. He never fell sick. He never even felt tired or weak. He thought maybe there was a mistake in the report. Maybe the lab had made an error. He decided to visit a private doctor the next day. He did not tell anyone, not even Jane. He just said he was going to meet a client. The private doctor ran some more tests. A few days later, the result was the same. The doctor explained it clearly. Matthew was not able to become a biological father. The problem was not serious for his health, but it was permanent. There was no treatment for it. Matthew sat quietly in the clinic. His mind was blank. He thought about Jane. She loved children. A few days ago, she had told him that she was ready to start a family. She smiled when she said that. She even looked at baby clothes in the market and smiled. Matthew could not tell her the truth. He could not see that smile disappear. He didn't want to break her heart. But inside he was broken. At home, Jane was happy. She was working hard. She was excited about her promotion. She had no idea what Matthew was going through. Matthew tried to act normal. He laughed with her. He had dinner with her. But sometimes he sat quietly, lost in his thoughts. Jane noticed his silence. She asked him, "Is everything okay?" Matthew said, "Yes, just a little tired." She believed him. Weeks passed, but the pain in Matthew's heart did not go away. He wanted Jane to be a mother. He wanted her to be happy. But he knew he could not give her that happiness. That thought made him feel helpless. Then one day, a strange idea came into his mind. A painful idea. A plan that could give Jane the baby she wanted. But the plan was risky. It was emotional. And it could change everything. Matthew knew someone from Jane's past. A name she had mentioned once, Stephen. He was Jane's close friend in school. Jane had said Stephen liked her, but she never took it seriously. They had lost contact years ago. Matthew searched for Stephen online. After a few days, he found him. He made a fake number. He started texting Jane, pretending to be an old friend. Jane got the first message one night. It said, "Hi, it's me, your school friend. Remember me?" Jane was confused. She didn't reply. But the messages kept coming. Friendly. Soft. Slowly, Jane began to reply too. She didn't know it was Matthew's plan. She didn't know it was her own husband behind those messages. And that's how everything started to change. Jane was confused at first. She got messages from an unknown number. The person said they were an old school friend. At first, she didn't reply. She thought it was a prank or maybe someone messaging the wrong person. But the messages continued. The person didn't say anything strange. The messages were normal, friendly, full of good memories from school. Jane started to think, who could it be? Slowly, her fear turned into curiosity. She began to reply, just to find out who the person was. The person said things about their school days, about teachers, classrooms, and small moments Jane had forgotten. Jane smiled reading some of the texts. It reminded her of simple times. She still didn't know who the person was. Then one day, the person wrote something that gave Jane a hint. He said, "I used to sit behind you in class. I always borrowed your notes. You helped me during exams." Jane paused. Only one person came to her mind, Stephen. Stephen was her close friend during school. He had a soft corner for Jane. He liked her, but Jane never gave it much thought back then. After school, they lost touch. She had not spoken to Stephen for years. Now she thought, maybe Stephen found her again. Maybe this number belonged to him. She tried calling the number that was sending the messages, but it was always switched off or unreachable. She felt a little strange. But the person kept sending messages. So polite. So kind. Jane slowly became more comfortable. She didn't share everything, but she replied with care. She didn't want to be rude. The person on the other side was always gentle. so she thought it was safe. She still didn't tell Matthew anything. She felt there was no need. Matthew looked tired and stressed from work. She didn't want to bother him. At the same time, Jane found her old diary. She kept it in a box with some books. When she opened it, she smiled. It had phone numbers and notes from her school days. She checked Stephen's old number just for fun. She tried calling it. This time, the phone rang. A male voice answered. Jane's heart beat faster. She said, "Is this Stephen?" The man on the other side replied, "Yes. Who's this?" Jane laughed and said, "It's Jane, from school." Stephen was surprised. He was happy. He said he remembered her. They started talking like old friends. But Jane didn't realize one thing. The person sending the text messages was not Stephen. It was Matthew, her husband, pretending to be Stephen. Stephen didn't know about the messages. He thought Jane just called him by chance. But Jane thought that Stephen was the one texting her all this time. Now their real conversation began. They talked a few times. Slowly, the connection grew. Stephen still had feelings for Jane. He was single. He had never married. He said he always liked Jane back in school. Jane felt emotional hearing this. She was already confused. Her husband was acting distant. He smiled less. He looked lost. Jane thought maybe Matthew was just stressed from work. She felt lonely and didn't know why. Stephen's voice gave her comfort. It reminded her of old days. She didn't plan to fall into anything wrong. But slowly, their talks became more personal. Then one day, they decided to meet. Just once as old friends. That meeting changed everything. Jane and Stephen met at a quiet cafe. It was a simple place, not very crowded. Jane wore a plain dress and came without telling Matthew. She told herself it was just a meeting between two old friends. She felt nervous, but also curious. When Stephen arrived, he smiled warmly. He looked a bit older than before, but his eyes were still the same, kind and full of emotion. They sat together and talked for a long time. They remembered their school days. They laughed about silly things they did. They spoke about their teachers, their friends, their childhood dreams. It felt so comfortable. Like no time had passed between them. Stephen listened carefully to Jane. He told her she hadn't changed much. Jane blushed and smiled. She didn't know why, but she liked hearing that. Stephen asked about Jane's life. She said she was married and happy. She didn't talk much about Matthew. She only said he was busy these days. She didn't mention that he had been acting a little distant. Stephen didn't ask too much, but he told her he was still single. He never stopped thinking about her. Jane felt a bit awkward when she heard that, but she didn't say anything. A part of her heart felt warm. She didn't understand why. After that meeting, they started talking more often. On calls, through messages. They shared things. Small thoughts, big emotions, memories. Stephen slowly opened his heart. He said he had loved Jane in school, and he still felt the same. Jane didn't know how to reply. She felt something inside her move. She wasn't sure what it was. Maybe loneliness, maybe confusion, or maybe something else. One evening, they met again, this time at Stephen's apartment. Jane had no plans to go far, but something unexpected happened. Stephen looked at her and said softly, "I always wanted to be close to you." Jane didn't stop him. She didn't say no. She felt his hand holding hers. And in that moment, all her feelings, all her confusion, everything mixed together. They got close. They became physical. After that night, Jane didn't feel okay. She woke up early and left Stephen's place. She cried on the way back. She felt like she had done something wrong. She thought of Mathew, his smile, his love, his care. She felt like she had broken something special. She told herself it was a mistake. It should not have happened. She was not that kind of person. But it did happen. Days passed. Jane kept quiet. She didn't tell anyone. She stayed normal at home. Mathew didn't ask anything. He was the same as always, quiet and caring. Jane felt even more guilty because Mathew was being so good to her. She tried to forget everything and move on. But then something happened that changed everything again. Jane missed her periods. She felt sick in the mornings. She was tired all the time. She took a pregnancy test, and it showed 2 lines. She was pregnant. Jane froze. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was beating fast. She couldn't understand what to do. She didn't know whose child it was. Was it Mathew's, or was it Stephen's? She didn't want an abortion. She believed that life was a gift. But she was scared. Scared of the truth. Scared of what would happen if Mathew found out. Scared of how Stephen might react. Still, she didn't tell anyone. Not Mathew. Not Stephen. She just kept it inside. She acted normal at work. She smiled at home. But inside, she was full of fear. Mathew, on the other hand, saw the signs. He noticed Jane was avoiding him sometimes. He noticed she was nervous. But he didn't say anything. He waited. Because deep inside, Mathew already knew. Mathew had already guessed the truth. From the moment Jane started acting differently, he knew something had changed. She smiled less, avoided eye contact sometimes, and stayed quiet more often than usual. Mathew didn't ask her anything directly. Instead, he observed. He stayed calm, though it hurt him deeply. Inside, he was going through a storm, but on the outside, he kept his face straight and gentle. You see, Mathew already knew he could never become a father. The reports from 2 different doctors had confirmed it. He had no doubt about it anymore. He had accepted the truth quietly. But he loved Jane so much that her happiness was more important to him than anything else. That's why he made a strange and painful decision. He planned everything, including the fake messages from an unknown number. He had used a different phone, created a new number, and sent those texts pretending to be someone from her past. His idea was never to hurt her or betray her. In his mind, he was making a sacrifice. He believed if Jane could have a child, she would be happy. He thought she would smile again, laugh again. He imagined her holding a baby, feeling complete. And if that child wasn't biologically his, it didn't matter to him. He just wanted Jane to feel the joy of being a mother. He felt that even if she never knew the truth, he would be at peace knowing he gave her that happiness. But things had taken a different turn. Mathew had only wanted Jane to reconnect with Stephen emotionally. He didn't expect her to become physically involved with him. That part hurt Mathew more than anything else. He hadn't thought it would go so far. But still, he said nothing. He forgave her in silence, even though she never asked for forgiveness. He reminded himself again and again. It was his plan, his idea, and she didn't know the full truth. Now Jane was pregnant. Mathew was sure it was not his child. Still, when Jane came to him with the news, pretending to be surprised and joyful, Mathew smiled. He congratulated her. He hugged her. He held her hand gently and said, "We are going to be parents." Jane felt tears in her eyes. She thought it was because of happiness. But deep inside, it was guilt. She didn't know how much Mathew already understood. She didn't know the weight of the truth he was carrying in silence. As the days passed, Jane's belly grew. So did Mathew's love for the unborn baby. He would read baby books, plan the baby room, and talk to Jane about names. Jane felt more confused. She saw his love. She saw his care. She wondered how she would ever tell him the truth, or if she even should. Meanwhile, Stephen had no idea about the pregnancy. Jane had stopped talking to him. She blocked his number, deleted all messages, and tried to erase that part from her life. She had made up her mind to live with Mathew, to give their relationship her full heart, and to raise the child as Mathew's. But what she didn't know was that Mathew had never been in the dark. One evening, while Jane was resting on the sofa, Mathew stood near the window, looking outside. His mind was full of thoughts. He wanted to tell her everything. That he knew, that he planned it all, that he had accepted everything. But then he looked at her, tired yet smiling, carrying new life inside her, and he stopped himself. He thought, maybe it's better if she never finds out. Maybe some truths are better left unsaid, because sometimes love is not about truth or fairness. Sometimes love is about sacrifice. And so, Mathew stayed quiet. He decided to become a father to a child that was not his. He promised himself that he would love that child with all his heart, because it was Jane's child, and that was enough for him. The months passed slowly. Jane's pregnancy moved ahead smoothly. She started glowing with happiness. She was more excited than ever. She decorated the baby's room with soft colors, toys, and tiny clothes. Mathew was with her at every step. He helped her choose everything. He held her hand during hospital visits. He made sure she ate on time, rested enough, and stayed happy. From outside, they looked like the perfect couple, getting ready to welcome their first baby. But inside, Mathew's heart was still heavy. Every time he saw Jane smile, a small part of him felt pain too. He remembered how the baby she was carrying was not his. He reminded himself again and again that he had made this choice for her. Still, it wasn't always easy. Some nights, when Jane was asleep, Mathew would sit alone in the dark. He would think about what his life would have been like if he could have become a father naturally. He wondered if Jane would ever find out the truth, and if she did, would she still love him the same way? Jane, on the other side, also felt the weight of her secret. Even though she tried her best to live a normal life, the truth she was hiding kept coming back to her thoughts. She had made a big mistake. She had been unfaithful, even though it happened just once. She believed that it had all happened because of emotions and confusion. She told herself that she loved only Mathew, but she could not forget that she had crossed a line. Every time Mathew looked at her with love and care, she felt a sting of guilt in her heart. But life didn't stop. The days went on. Slowly, Jane entered the 9th month of her pregnancy. Mathew was now more involved than ever. He attended parenting classes with her. He learned how to hold a newborn, how to feed a baby, how to change diapers. Jane watched him doing everything with full heart. She wondered how she was going to live with this lie forever. She thought many times about telling him the truth, but then she would look into his eyes and see peace, see love, and she just couldn't break that. One evening, Mathew took out a small diary from his drawer. It was the same diary Jane had used in school, where she had written her old friends' contact numbers. He had found it a long time ago and had used it to start the plan with Stephen. As he looked at the diary again, he felt torn. A part of him was proud that his plan worked because it gave Jane happiness. But another part of him felt tired. Keeping this secret had changed something inside him. He didn't feel the same peace anymore. Meanwhile, Jane had a dream one night. In the dream, she saw herself telling Mathew everything. She cried in the dream, and Mathew just hugged her and said, "I know." When she woke up, she was sweating. The dream felt too real. She looked at Mathew sleeping beside her and touched his hand. She whispered softly, "Do you really know?" But he didn't wake up. He just moved a little and kept sleeping. Jane didn't say anything more. The next morning, Jane started writing a letter. She didn't know if she would ever give it to Mathew, but she wanted to write her heart out. In the letter, she wrote everything from the first text message to the meetings with Stephen and the truth about the pregnancy. She wrote how much she regretted her mistake and how deeply she loved Mathew. After finishing the letter, she kept it inside a book in her cupboard. She didn't want to give it to him just yet, but she felt better after writing it. At the same time, Matthew had started preparing mentally for the birth of the baby. He knew that the child would come soon. He also knew that the child would never know the real truth. And he was okay with that. He had made up his mind. He was going to be the best father he could be. He would give all his love to the baby. He believed that love was more important than blood. So, as Jane's due date got closer, both of them waited in silence. Jane with a heavy heart full of guilt and love. Matthew with a silent heart full of pain and deep care. Neither of them spoke about the truth. They just kept moving forward, one day at a time, preparing for the biggest change in their lives. The day finally arrived. Jane's labor started in the early morning. Matthew rushed her to the hospital. He was nervous but tried to stay strong for Jane. She held his hand tightly. The pain was sharp, but Jane was brave. Nurses moved her into the delivery room. Matthew waited outside, walking back and forth. His heart was beating fast. He was about to become a father, though not by blood. Still, in his heart, this child already felt like his own. After many hours, the nurse came out and smiled. She said, "It's a baby girl." Matthew's eyes filled with tears. He rushed inside. Jane was tired, but she had a big smile on her face. The baby was lying beside her, wrapped in a soft white blanket. Matthew looked at the little face. She was so tiny, so innocent. At that moment, everything else faded away. All his pain, all the secrets, all the plans. None of it mattered. He held the baby gently in his arms. She opened her eyes and looked at him. He smiled and whispered, "Welcome home, little one." Days passed. Jane came home from the hospital with the baby. They named her Lily. The house was full of soft sounds. Baby cries, laughter, and lullabies. Matthew helped with everything. He changed diapers, woke up at night to rock Lily, and sang her to sleep. Jane watched him with silent tears in her eyes. She couldn't believe how much love he was giving to the baby. He never once made her feel distant. He was a perfect father in every way. Her guilt grew stronger each day. But her love for Matthew also deepened. Matthew, on the other hand, had found a new purpose. Lily gave him a reason to smile again. He started to feel that maybe life didn't go wrong after all. Maybe this was how it was meant to be. He didn't think about his infertility anymore. He was too busy being a dad. But at the same time, he kept remembering how this all started. It was his idea. It was his secret. And only he knew the full truth. Sometimes, when he looked at Jane, he could see that she was carrying her own pain too. He wished he could tell her that he understood everything, that he had planned everything. But he stayed quiet. He thought silence was better than breaking her heart with the truth. One evening, after putting Lily to sleep, Jane sat beside Matthew. They were both quiet. Then she said, "You're a wonderful father." Mathew smiled and said, "Because I have a wonderful wife." She looked into his eyes for a long time. It felt like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Mathew waited, but she changed the topic. She couldn't tell him. Not yet. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. Jane received a call from Stephen. He hadn't contacted her since that one mistake, but now he called just to ask how she was. Jane felt uneasy. She quickly ended the call. But that small call disturbed her. She didn't want her past to come back again. That night, she took out the letter she had written for Mathew. She read it again. Her hands shook. Her heart was heavy, but she still couldn't give it to him. The next day, Mathew found Jane sitting quietly in Lily's room. She was holding the baby, but her face looked sad. He sat beside her and asked, "Are you okay?" She nodded but didn't speak. Mathew didn't ask again. He just placed his hand gently on her shoulder. Inside, both of them were carrying the same weight, but they didn't know that the other person also knew. Over the next few days, things went back to normal. Jane kept herself busy with the baby. Mathew went back to work, but every day he rushed home early to be with his daughter. He loved spending time with her. She would smile when she saw him. She would try to grab his finger. He felt a strong connection with her. He started forgetting the pain. All he could see now was his family, his wife and daughter. And even if he had to carry the truth forever, he decided that their happiness was more important than anything else. Time moved forward. Lily was now 6 months old. She had started crawling, and her laugh filled every corner of the house. Jane and Mathew often sat on the floor and played with her. Those moments were pure and full of joy. It looked like a happy family, and in many ways it truly was. But under that happiness, the unspoken truth still lived silently between Mathew and Jane. One Saturday morning, Jane was cleaning the old bookshelf in their bedroom. A small notebook fell out. It was the diary she once used in her school days, the same diary where she had written Stephen's contact number. Her hands froze for a moment. Her eyes rested on that page. The old memory returned. The message, the calls, the meeting, and the mistake she had made. She felt a knot in her stomach. The guilt returned like a wave. She closed the diary and kept it away, but the feelings stayed. That evening, Jane and Mathew were sitting on the balcony. Jane looked at Mathew and said, "Mathew, do you think all secrets should always be told?" Mathew was surprised by the question. He looked at her but didn't answer right away. Instead, he asked, "Why do you ask?" Jane didn't answer. She just looked away. Mathew quietly said, "Sometimes silence protects love. Some truths are only heavy when spoken." Jane turned to him and stared. It was as if, for a moment, she felt Mathew knew something, but she brushed the thought away. Mathew had learned to read Jane's face. He noticed her discomfort. He wanted to tell her that everything was okay, that he was never angry, never hurt. He wanted to say, I was the one who planned everything. But he didn't. He thought maybe if she believed it was a mistake, she would let it go and heal, and he didn't want to take away that healing. Meanwhile, Stephen was still in touch. He never crossed any line after that meeting, but once a month he would send a small message to ask about her and the baby. Jane never replied, but this time, she felt the need to close the door forever. She sent him one short message, "Please do not contact me again. Whatever happened, it was a mistake. I love my husband and my daughter. I wish you well." After sending the message, she blocked the number. She felt lighter. A small weight had lifted. Back at home, things started to feel more peaceful. Jane looked more relaxed. Matthew noticed the change but said nothing. He simply smiled more and spent more time with Lily. He would often sit on the floor with her toys and make funny faces. Lily loved her father. She would crawl toward him and try to climb on his lap. Jane would watch them from the kitchen, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. No matter how Lily had come into their life, this was her family. And Matthew was the father her daughter deserved. One night, while putting Lily to sleep, Matthew whispered a soft story in her ear. Jane stood at the door, listening. He told Lily, "You are my biggest gift. You made me a father. You gave me a new life. And I will always protect you and your mother." Jane had tears in her eyes. She didn't say anything, but her heart felt a strange peace. Somewhere inside, she felt that Matthew knew more than he ever said. Weeks later, Matthew received a call from his doctor. They wanted to follow up on his case, just a routine check. Matthew had ignored all hospital calls after the report. But this time, he decided to go. At the hospital, the doctor welcomed him and said, "Matthew, we want to repeat the test once again. Sometimes errors happen, and you look completely healthy. We just want to be sure." Matthew agreed, even though he had no hope. A few days later, the new report arrived. The doctor looked shocked. He said, "Matthew, according to these new results, you are not infertile. The earlier report was wrong. You can become a father." Matthew was stunned. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The first report had changed everything in his life. And now this new truth came out, after so much had already happened. Matthew didn't know what to feel. He left the hospital and sat in his car for a long time. His heart was full of thoughts. What did this mean? Should he tell Jane? Should he tell her that all the pain, the mistake, the lies, were all built on a report that was never true? He didn't know what to do. But one thing was clear in his mind. He still loved Jane, and he still loved Lily. No matter what the report said, that love was real. That bond was real. And maybe, just maybe, the truth didn't matter anymore. After Matthew came back from the hospital with the new report in his hand, his mind was full of confusion. The paper in front of him said something very different from what he had believed for months. The doctors had confirmed that the earlier report was incorrect. Matthew was not infertile. He could become a father. His body was healthy. Nothing was wrong with him. The truth hit him harder than the first lie ever did. He sat in his car, parked outside their home, holding the new report. He thought about everything that had happened since the day he had read the first report. He remembered how broken he felt, how helpless. He had cried in silence, never showing his pain to Jane. He had planned everything so carefully, just to see Jane happy. He had acted like a stranger. He had sent those messages pretending to be someone from her past. He had made her believe she had reconnected with Stephen. And because of all this, Jane had gone through so much guilt and confusion. Now Matthew asked himself, was all of this needed? Wouldn't it have been better to just tell her the truth from the beginning? But the past could not be changed. The damage was already done. Jane had already spent nights crying in silence, and he had made that happen, even though his reason was love. Now he had to carry that burden. That night, Matthew didn't sleep well. He kept looking at Lily, sleeping peacefully between him and Jane. She looked so innocent, her tiny hands curled into fists, her breath soft. She was the center of their world. Jane had given birth to her, but Matthew had chosen to become her father, knowing she wasn't his by blood. And even now, even after learning the truth, nothing changed in his heart. He loved Lily more than words could say. And Jane, he still loved her deeply, even though she had once made a mistake. The next morning, Matthew decided to go for a walk. He needed time to think. As he walked through the park near their home, he remembered their early days of marriage. How full of laughter and hope they were. They were a perfect team. They had dreams, plans, and love. That bond had never really broken, even when everything around them got shaken. Later that day, Jane noticed something different about Matthew. He seemed quieter than usual, but also calm. He didn't talk much, but when he played with Lily, there was a softness in his eyes that Jane hadn't seen before. It was like something inside him had changed, but she couldn't tell what. That evening, Matthew sat next to Jane on the couch. She was feeding Lily and smiling at her. Matthew took a deep breath and said, "Jane, I went to the hospital yesterday." Jane turned to him, a little surprised. "Why?" she asked. "Just to follow up," he replied. "They did some tests again." Jane looked at him, waiting for him to say more. Matthew held her hand and continued, "Jane, the first report I got, the one that said I couldn't be a father, it was wrong." Jane froze for a moment. Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. "I mean," he said, "that I can become a father. I'm completely fine. It was a mistake in the report." Jane couldn't believe what she was hearing. She looked at him, unsure how to react. She wanted to be happy, but something inside her felt confused. Matthew looked into her eyes and said, "Jane, I made many mistakes after that first report. I didn't tell you the truth. I tried to fix things in my own way. I thought I was doing it for you, for your happiness. But I now understand that truth is always better, even when it hurts. Jane didn't say anything. Her eyes were full of tears. She just nodded slowly. That night, they didn't talk much, but their silence was full of understanding. Matthew had accepted Lily as his daughter even before he knew the truth about his own body. And Jane had always loved him, even when she felt broken inside. Now, with the truth out, something new began between them. Not the old love, but something deeper, built with pain, truth, mistakes, and forgiveness. Something real. Something strong. As days passed, the silence between Matthew and Jane began to fade. Slowly, they started talking more. Not just about the usual things like work, food, or baby care, but about deeper feelings, about truth, trust, and the meaning of love. There were no arguments, no shouting. Just two people trying to understand each other after everything they had been through. Matthew, for the first time, opened his heart completely. He told Jane everything. From the moment he got the false report, to the idea that grew in his mind, to the decision to pretend as Stephen, and how he had hoped she would feel loved and special again. He explained how broken he felt, and how helpless it was for a man who wanted to give happiness to his wife, but couldn't give her the one thing she desired the most: a child. Jane listened to every word. She didn't interrupt. Her eyes were filled with tears. Some were tears of sadness, but some were of relief too. Now everything made sense. The strange messages, her own feelings of guilt, the emotional distance between them. It was all connected. Jane also shared her side. She said she never stopped loving Matthew, not even for a second. She was just lonely and confused when she started replying to the messages. She thought maybe reconnecting with someone from the past would help her understand herself better. But she never meant to hurt him. And when things went too far with Stephen, she was already drowning in guilt. She said that even when she was happy about her pregnancy, a part of her was scared every day. Scared that the truth would come out and destroy their marriage. But now, everything was out in the open. Nothing was hidden anymore. They both realized one thing very clearly. Love is not just about good days and happy moments. Real love shows its power in the worst times. When things break, when mistakes happen, when lies are told, and when hearts are wounded. If love survives through all that, it becomes stronger than ever. Matthew had every reason to walk away. Jane had reasons to blame herself forever. But both of them chose to stay. Not because it was easy, but because they knew that what they had built in those 3 years of marriage was real. It was worth fighting for. It was worth forgiving for. Little Lily became the symbol of this new beginning. A child born in a very unusual way. A life that came from confusion, mistakes, and lies, but who brought light and love into their world. Every time Matthew held Lily, he didn't think about biology. He thought about Jane. He thought about how much he loved her, and how much he wanted her to be happy. And every time Jane looked at Matthew playing with Lily, she saw more than a husband. She saw a man who loved without limits. In the end, their story was not about cheating. It was about sacrifice, pain, and learning the true depth of love. Life had tested them. It had taken them through a dark tunnel, but they had found their way out, together. And that was what mattered the most. Their love survived. Their family stood strong. And every day they chose to stay, to forgive, and to grow. That was their answer to life's hardest question. Do you call it cheating? Maybe not. Maybe it was just love in its most human form. Imperfect, but true. That's the end of the story. If you enjoyed the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more exciting tales. Check out our other videos and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay tuned for the next adventure. Thanks for watching.